Well, in the Wesleyan Church, we count all kinds of things. Some of them matter, some of them I'm not sure they do. But I want to tell you something we counted up last week that matters very much. And it's the reason why we do what we do. But in the 6 services that we held between our 2 campuses, we want you to know that 113 people indicated on a card and turned in the card that said they made a commitment to Jesus Christ last week. Just give God praise for that. That has brought a smile to my face all week long. It's why we do what we do around here. And we've been spending the last 5 weeks talking about getting an understanding of who God is as Jesus' life was revealed to us. And so we spent the entirety of that time looking backwards at Jesus' life as he walked here and what that taught us about how he was a God who is revealed to us as one who loves us, as one who heals us, and one who challenges us, and one who raises us, one who even gives us eternal life. We talked about last week right in this room. But you know what? We have the capacity as humans to look what we call panoramically. We can look all around. In fact, I heard the other day, brand new invention is going to be available this summer. I think Amazon Echo is going to be able to do it, and some other things are going to be able to do it. But have you ever like Skyped into a meeting and you can only see whatever direction the little camera on the computer is pointing? Well, this summer they've got this device coming out that you're going to be able to set in the center of a table, and it has 360-degree camera, so wherever you are, you'll be able to see anybody at the table. And some of you think that's a terrible idea, don't you? Guys, you want to still be able to like scrunch up your face when the person says something really stupid on the other side. You're not going to be able to do that now because you don't know who they're looking at. But that's just a camera coming up with a capacity that we already have, the capacity to see panoramically all that is around us. And God has given us that capacity, and he wants us to be able to see him panoramically as well. Not just who Jesus was, but I want you to know, to find out and discover the fullness of who our God is, we don't only look back, we look forward. You understand that? We also look forward because he's coming soon. We just sang about it a moment ago. And Jesus is coming again. In fact, you need to understand clearly that Jesus never held this information back from us. He was always clear with us. One day, he was coming again. He told the disciples that before he ever went to the cross and died. After he died and rose again, he told the disciples that again during the 40 days in between before he ascended back to heaven. And then, are you ready for this? On the day Jesus ascended to heaven, as he was going up, there were 2 angels there. And as Jesus was going up and leaving, the angels said, "Don't worry, he's coming back again someday." Now get this, the very first thing that the disciples ever heard, the first thing that ever came to their ears as they see Jesus leaving, are 2 angels, and they don't say, "All right, boys, don't mess this up." The angels don't say, "Hurry up, get busy." What do the angels say? Jesus is coming back. It's the very first words that came to them as Jesus left. So I need you to understand that this idea has been held on to by the people of God throughout time ever since Jesus left. It's been believed generation to generation to generation, and it's not some seldom tried side dish of our faith. In fact, 23 out of 27 New Testament books testify to the fact that Jesus is coming again. And one of the images that's regularly used in the Bible for this idea that one day we're going to be reunited with Christ, brought back together with him, is the image of a bride and a groom. In fact, when you read through the book of Revelation, you get through the first 19 chapters, and there's war, and there's battles, and people are fighting against the saints, and God is slowly working his way throughout all things. And you get to chapter 19, and God wins the ultimate victory. And I want you to see how heaven responds immediately after the victory has been won. They pivot, and look what they say. "Let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory, for the wedding of the Lamb has come, and the bride has made herself ready." So as soon as God wins the victory, the very first thing that heaven says is, "Hey, get ready. It's time for the wedding." That's how direct this imagery is. In fact, let me show you that this idea of the whole bride and groom thing didn't just come when John wrote the book of Revelation. In fact, a different John, John the Baptizer, was Jesus' cousin. And at the very beginning of Jesus' ministry, John already had been out ministering. He was what the prophets called a forerunner, one who came before Jesus. He told about Jesus' ministry. He prepared the people for it. And so what happens is John's out there ministering. He's very popular with the people. People are flocking to him. John's baptizing people. But then Jesus comes on the scene, and Jesus begins to teach and lead as far as the kingdom of God goes. He begins to work miracles. And so what happens is Jesus' crowds begin to swell, and John's crowds begin to diminish. And so this bothers some of John's most faithful disciples. And they start saying, hey, John, have you noticed that Jesus is in the big auditoriums and you're in the little ones? What gives? And John says, guys, don't worry about this. In fact, look at how he says it. He says, a man can receive only what is given him from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Christ, but am sent ahead of him. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine, and it is now complete. So John already is using this bride and groom imagery. And so you think about this idea that Jesus came here, and you're asking yourself, why did he come? And one way to express why Jesus came to earth the first time might be to look at it like this. He came to choose his bride. He came to come and win his bride. You might even say it this way. He came to purchase his bride. Now, don't picture mail order, okay? That's not what I mean, all right? Don't picture mail order. So what do you mean purchase the bride? Understand that in Jesus' day, there was this idea of the dowry or the bride price. When a man came and he and his father would actually negotiate this and go and say, I want to marry your daughter. Okay, well, that man would say, well, I'm going to lose her out of my home. And in those days, they didn't have all the machinery and all the stuff that we have, and human power was very important. He's losing a daughter who can no longer, pick in his fields and no longer be home and taking care of the household and all these things. And so this man is saying, I love her, I adore her, I want her to be mine. And so he would give a price. He would pay a dowry. And this is what Jesus did for us. He actually said, I love you so much, I will pay a price for you. And do you want to see what the price is? It says 1 Corinthians 6. He actually says, you were bought at a price, and that price was his own blood. He chose us. He loved us so much, he came and said, oh, you are the one that I want to make my bride. And so he laid down his life for us. And so one good way to say this that I was reading and came across, and I just loved it, was this. It's almost as if Jesus came the first time and we got engaged. He chose us. And now someday he's coming again, and when he does, we're getting married. Might be a good way to look at it. Now, I want to take just a minute this morning before we go any further, because I think listening to this kind of terminology is harder for half of the room. You know what I'm talking about? I think this kind of terminology is a little harder for men, because we're like, okay, so we're going to go through this metaphor, and I get to be the bride? It's not what you really would expect, right? And so I just want to say to you today, understand the idea of the metaphor that we, the church, are the bride. We conglomerately are the bride, but the church is made up of us as individuals. So don't get caught up in the gender thing here. In fact, never get caught up in gender wars over God. Don't waste your energy on that, because God is spirit. He is so far beyond our concept of gender. It's God who chose to make us in the genders that we are. And let me just stop today and say, you know what? God made us male and female. Those are the ways. That's the way God made us, folks. There's two options, okay? I don't care if Harvard's application says there's 23. Come on, church, you all right? It's where we are. It's where we are as a people, male and female. But this morning, guys, don't let this trouble you. In fact, you just kind of think of it as, you're the fiance, they're the fiance. Have you ever looked at the word fiance? It's the same word, just add an E. All right, I know you probably haven't taken a lot of French in your day, and all I can remember out of all the French I took is, please may I sharpen my pencil. I can still remember how to say that. But that's French word there. How do you say that top word? Take a run. Anybody know how you say that? Fiance. How do you say the bottom word? You got it. Fiance, fiance. So there's a matter of one E this morning. So let's not worry about it. So don't worry about gender thing today. Catch the metaphor that we're talking about. This idea that Jesus came and he chose us and that this day is coming. And so it seems to me if we look forward to this God who loved us so much that he gave his life for us, that we naturally have to stop and have a checkup of our heart that says, am I living my life like one who's engaged and getting ready to be married? As the perspective goes for how I am treating God, what kind of fiancé am I? Now, I have to tell you that I'm an expert on this topic right now, on this getting ready to get married thing. Not because I'm getting ready to get married. I did it once, loved it, still happy, never changing my mind on that, all right? I'm an expert on this because I got a daughter planning to get married next spring, all right? And so I am watching this whole preparing to get married thing roll out. In fact, there's a lot of pressure on me right now. You think there's pressure for other reasons for us to get that building up out there? That ain't nothing compared to the pressure my daughter's putting on me to get that building done out there. I never met a daughter at 20 years old who ever cared before about how the permit process was going with the county. When we breaking ground? When's it going to be done? How long is it going to take to build the building? And you know why she cares? She needs a bigger building because she wants to invite the whole world to her wedding. I'm not even kidding you. I told her that, you know what, honey? Why don't we just send up a skywriter and say, unless you hear otherwise, you're invited. And so I get this daughter, and she's marrying a fine young man. They'll probably watch this video. So there you go, Stephen. Shout out to you, buddy. Aren't I nice to you, right? She's marrying this great guy, and there's all this excitement and all this enthusiasm going on. And so I'm getting firsthand what it looks like to watch someone preparing for the wedding. And you see, spiritually, folks, this is the place in which we live. Chosen by God, loved by him, bought by him. He's given his life for us, but we're waiting for the wedding day when he's coming back. So how should we be? Let's do a heart check this morning. The first one is this. There should be expectation. There should be expectation. Look what it says in Peter. It says, first of all, understand that in the last days, scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires, and they'll say, where is this coming he promised? Ever since our fathers died, everything goes on as it has been since the beginning of creation. Let me tell you, sometimes we need to stop and say, where is my heart at as far as anticipation that one day God's coming again? Because if you have no sense of expectation, you need to back up and say, wait, do I really believe the day's coming that I'm getting married? Listen, if you got a friend and they're getting married and you go to them and say, hey, are you excited? And they say, I suppose so. You need to call me. And you need to line up a time for them to come see me because we need to have a talk. All right? Getting married? I guess so. No. That day's coming. I'm excited about it. You see, any fiancé has to walk this balance, living in today and making the most of it, but looking forward to the wedding tomorrow. Isn't that right? You got to have both sides of the balance. And I want to quickly touch on both ends of the balance because I've watched people fall off both sides on this. The first side is this. It would be like knocking on the door of your daughter and say, honey, aren't you going to work today? I think they're expecting you. And she says, no, I decided just to lay in bed today and think about my wedding all day long. Right? You say, no, honey, there's more to living today than just that. You need to go to work and at least make it look like you're working hard, even if in the back of your mind you're thinking about your wedding all day long. No, in fact, go and really work hard. Be legit. See? And I've met some Christians who get so caught up in the prophecy and so caught up in the, and what they want to do is they want to take the newspaper and they want to somehow find a way to always insert what's happening into the Bible. And I don't mean that we should be ignorant or we should not be aware of our days. I don't mean that. But I mean this. I've discovered that people who get too caught up in prophecy, they don't end up excited about Jesus coming again. They end up afraid about the whole thing. They get so caught up in the signs that they're focused on the signs. Because in reality, if we can read all that stuff, it ought to only make us excited. Come on, am I right, church? If we see this stuff and it really is happening, yeah, I know it kind of makes our heart quiver to see some of the difficult things going on, but if what we're saying is this points to Jesus coming again, then we ought to be excited, but I see fear. And if you're talking to someone about getting married and they say, I'm really afraid, you need to call me and they need to come see me. We need to talk. Then there's the other side. The other side is getting so caught up in this world that we forget there is a world to come. No expectation, no anticipation, no thought. We make ourselves at home as if we're home, and we aren't home. Understand what I'm saying? We ask ourselves, why should I suffer? Why should there be difficulty? Why should there be hardship? You know why? Because Jesus said for his church and his people, there would be suffering. In fact, we love that verse. It says, I love to know Christ and the power of his resurrection. And we never want to say the next line, which is, and the fellowship of sharing with him in his sufferings. And sometimes we say, why can't I just chase after every desire I have? My friends do it, man, they just go out and do anything they want to do. And they just, man, if they lust for it, they do it, and they make a way, and they buy anything they want, and they say anything they want, and they do anything they want. And then I become a Christian. I got to buy the right things and say the right things and do the right things and avoid the right things. And we get this backwards mindset going on as if the world is really living and we're not. You know what Paul said? Paul said, you know what? I live the life apart from God. And now that I've come to know Christ, I consider all that other stuff rubbish. Now that I've gained Christ. We reviewed this passage before. For those of you who are new, we went into a little bit of Greek here. We talked about the word rubbish. Any of you remember this? We talked about the word rubbish. We said the word rubbish is skubala. And skubala is the Greek word for poo-poo. Stop making the world your standard about what's good and what's right, because I can tell you something. You'll never be fully satisfied in this world, and you ought not be. You ought not seek to have this world give you all the satisfaction you ever want, because there's a day coming when you're really going home. That's when we'll really go, and we'll be wed, and we'll be fulfilled, and there should be some expectation for that day as we look forward to it coming. Well, beyond expectation, there is preparation. Say that word with me. Preparation. Let's go back to that passage we read earlier, and now let's look to the next part of it. Let us be glad and rejoice. Let us give honor to him, for the time has come for the wedding feast of the Lamb, and his bride has prepared herself. Now, this is the next verse. So she has been given the finest of pure white linen to wear, for the fine linen represents the good deeds of God's holy people. All right, let's go back to that friend of yours that's getting married, and you walk up to him and say, man, are you getting married? Are you excited about that? Do you have any expectation? You're like, yes, I do. And you're like, all right, well, it could be coming soon. You know, I know the date's pretty soon. Have you done anything for it? Nothing. Really? Have you begun to look at dress? Nope. Have you picked it? Nope. What color? Don't know. All right, and they just keep going. And every time you talk to them, have you made any preparation for it? Nope. At some point, you're going to look at them and go, do you really think you're getting married? Are you convinced there's going to be a wedding? Because it doesn't seem like it. And folks, while we're in this life, we're told that we are making preparation to be this bride, that when Jesus sees us and when he looks upon us as the church, he's going to go, oh, you look so wonderful. You look so great, and we're given this white linen to wear. And so you're like, well, how in the world in this life do I prepare myself for that wedding? And it's a great question. How do you do that? And it's so wild that the answer is given to us here. Peek at that verse again, and now let's just throw a little bit of red in the part that you need to see highlighted there at the very end. You know how it says, just above the red, it says, she's been given the finest of pure white linen to wear. And read the red with me. What does it say? For the fine linen represents the good deeds of God's holy people. I got to tell you, when I read that and started looking at it, I went, wow. I was actually a little surprised by what the definition of the linen was. Because when I think of purity and white linen, I'm like, maybe it's like, so you know, the pure white linen is how God's people learned how not to talk with filthy mouths anymore. Or the pure white linen was they learned how to perfect all of their thinking or all that. And listen, God wants to work on our mouths and he wants to work on our thoughts, and all that is true. But in this instance, it says, this is how we prepare. Do you know how we prepare? We go out into our world right here, right now, and we begin to say, okay, God, what do you got for me to do? What do you need me to do with my money? What do you need me to do with my time? How can I spend my love on behalf of people? How can I have a heart breaks for people of need and do something about it? That's what it says. Now, I want you to hear something clearly this morning. I do not want you to miss this. This is very important. We are saved. We come into a relationship with God because of his grace. Through faith, we receive salvation. That's how we are saved. And let's lay that down and establish that. And you hear that on a regular basis around here. So don't leave here now that I'm going to talk for a few minutes about works and go, oh my gracious, Pastor Todd was preaching to be saved, you got to do works. No, I wasn't, and no, I didn't. Are we all good? Nod your head if you're with me. Entrance into the family of God by relationship with God that comes by saying yes and thank him for what he's done. We've got that, right? Now that we've got that, can I tell you something? The Bible says immediately after it says that it's by grace we're saved, it says we are created unto good works. In other words, now that you're saved, what in the world are you doing with it? How you using your words? How you using everything you got? And this is how we are preparing ourselves to meet Jesus. He's looking at us, wow, you look so beautiful. What a job you've done preparing yourself to meet with me. Now, I want to just share a little bit of history with you because I was a history major, and if I don't get to use all that history sometimes, then I just feel like I wasted all that money at Eastern Nazarene College. So I think sometimes it's value for us just to look back a little bit in history. And here's one of the things. One of the knocks that we've taken in the evangelical movement, you know what it means in the evangelical movement? Churches that stress the importance of preaching the gospel and sharing about salvation. One of the knocks that we've taken, and to an extent that we've deserved, is that we preach a negative gospel. That you meet Christians and they seem so bound up and so unhappy, and you go to churches and everything's so somber and all that. And so how many of you have ever met someone who said it didn't look like Christians were having very much fun in this life? Come on, you've met people like that, right? 3 of us, great. All right, so, you just been through that. And, some of the history behind that, folks, comes from the fact that about 100 years ago, some theologians began to look at the historic arc of the church through history and began to create this idea that said, we're now in these last days, and since we're in these last days, basically the world's going to be a shipwreck. And since the world is a shipwreck, the best we can hope to do as a church is just be these people in lifeboats who paddle around and pull other people out of the water. In fact, we wrote a lot of hymns, and there's some foundations of truth in those hymns, rescue the perishing and all, and there's foundations of truth in there. But here's the problem. The problem is, along with that mentality came this idea that we're just trying to hang in there till Jesus comes back. We're in this little lifeboat and the waves are rocking, but we're trying so hard. And so, come quick, Lord, because we're trying to make it all the way to the end. And it became this fearful, negative, everything around us is falling down, but somehow we're going to hang in there, Jesus. And this kind of philosophy carried through so much of the evangelical movement because tied to it was a conservative viewpoint. An important viewpoint was a conservative viewpoint that we ought to read Scripture literally as true. So these two ideas got tied together. And so what ended up happening is we ended up having people going, man, I go to church and I just feel like I get beat up every week. It feels so negative. It feels so, these people look like they're scared of life. And what they forget is that the history of the church has not been a history of fear. We've been a history of people who've made all the difference. We've gone out and ministered. We've told people that there's hope in this life, and there's joy, and there's peace, and there's possibility, and there's potential, that God has a plan for their life. And in the midst of when they're struggling, we said, let me give you a hand up. And we've built hospitals, and we've been the ones that stuck around to bury the dead when disease ravaged the communities. We've been a people of hope. Get this, we have been historically as the people of God, not those who throw up their hands, but those who roll up their sleeves. Do you understand what I'm saying to you today? This is what we ought to be. And when communities that we live in cannot bank on the Church of Jesus Christ to care enough about the world around them, to show it by how they love, something's wrong. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to walk into heaven, into my wedding ceremony naked. I hadn't even written that down. It just came to me, and it was a good line, too. I want to be clothed in this white linen that is the good works that God has given me. Listen, the capacity to do. The capacity to do. He says, I've given this to you. Now use it. Imagine this way, and then we'll go to the last point. Imagine that you're moving to a brand new community. And as soon as you got in the community, you begin to hear this one name, this one guy, and like everybody talks about him because he owns, seems like, just about everything, and he knows everybody, and he's just, it's this guy, and you haven't met him yet, but you've just heard about him, and so you don't know him. You don't know anything about him. You just keep on hearing his name everywhere you go. And so you're like, well, I guess I'm at some point going to have to formulate an opinion about this guy. But you don't know what to think. You're new to the community. And one day early on, you're driving home from work, and you're just on the outskirts of town, and your truck breaks down. You blow a tire. And you're off the side of the road, and you're having problems getting it fixed, and it doesn't seem to be working right. And suddenly you have someone pull over. You're like, oh, man, it's really great that someone's pulling over to help me. And so they come out and they say, hey, let me help you with that. I change these all the time. And they change the tire for you. And while they're doing it, they're holding this pleasant conversation with you. And they're just so kind. And they get it all done. Hey, can I give you? No, I'm not taking any money for that. And so as they begin to walk away, you say, well, at least let me shake your hand and tell me your name. And so he tells you his name. He's got the same last name as that guy you haven't met yet who runs it all. You say, are you related to him? Before you can even finish the sentence, he goes, yeah, I'm his son. He jumps in his truck and leaves. You drive around for a few days and you start realizing, you know what, man, I got to get rid of this vehicle, man. This thing's a problem. So you decide, you know what, I'm going to go to the used car lot in town. Now, with all due apologies to any used car salesman in the room, God bless you. I'm so grateful for you, but it is a scary place for most of us to go. And you pull in and you're there and you're looking and you don't know what to do. You don't know a lot about all this, and out comes this nice young lady, and she's so helpful and she's so kind and she's so honest. She just really, she says she's not going to let you spend more than you really ought to spend and get into the right thing. And she's just so great. And before it's all said and done, you buy the right vehicle, and when you're signing on the dotted line, she hands you her card just before you go out the door, and she says, now listen, if you have any issues or any problems, you need to call me because we'll make sure we take care of this. And she hands you the card, and as you start to walk out the door, you stop and you look, and there's that name again. And you turn around and you say, are you related? And before you can finish, he says, yep, I'm his granddaughter. And you get in that car and you're driving towards home, and you realize you need a few groceries, and you pull into the grocery store, and you walk in the grocery store, and you're picking up some things, and as you go along, there's something exactly what you need, but it's way up on the top shelf. So you're kind of standing there wondering whether or not you should dare step on the bottom shelf to reach for the top shelf. And along comes this young guy, man. He barely looks like he could be 16 and working. He's got the apron on because he works at the store. And he sees that you're looking, and he stops. He says, can I help you with something? And you say, well, I need that can way up there. Well, he ain't much taller than you. He says, let me go get a step stool. I'll be right back. And you say to him, are you on your break? He says, yeah, but it's no big deal. And he goes and he finds a little ladder thing, and he goes up and he gets you what you need, and then he just begins to talk with you. And you have this conversation, and he uses up his whole break just conversing with you. He says, oh, you know what, I got to get back to work. And so he goes back to bagging up the groceries, and you finish up your order, and when you're checking out, he says, hey, you know what, my shift's ending right now anyhow. And so he walks out with you and loads your groceries in your car, and the whole time he's just so kind and so friendly. And he puts the hatch down, and you say, hey, can I at least know your name? And he tells you his name, and there's that name again. You say, are you related to him? I'm his great-grandson. Have you gathered an impression of what that person you've never met is like? Yeah, you have. Because you met his children and his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren, and you said, I think I can understand what he must be like. You get it? Jesus said, no one's seen the Father. But every day, folks, people see us. What do they think God's like? What adjectives might they use of God after they've used those adjectives about us? Preparation. Finally, faithfulness. This one's a no-brainer. We all know that a fiancé must be faithful. The days of sampling and choosing is over. The commitment is made, and you can't press headlong towards a wedding if you're still out testing the waters of other loves. I'm engaged. I'm going to be married. This is the one I've chosen. And Paul, speaking like a pastor, protecting his church in Corinth, says it this way: I'm jealous for you with a godly jealousy. I promised you to one husband, to Christ, so that I might present you as a pure virgin to him. But I'm afraid that just as Eve was deceived by the serpent's cunning, your minds may somehow be led astray from your sincere and pure devotion to Christ. Let me just be straight with you as we wrap up. Not one of you here in this room would be content to have a fiancé who was faithful to you one day a week and not the other 6. And not one of us should believe for a moment that God is content with us coming in and living for him on Sunday and chasing every other love the rest of the week. He's called us to be a faithful people, righteous and pure and holy, chasing after him, filling our desires with the good things of God, living as he has called us to live. It's time for us to stop chasing after every lie the devil throws out there. It's time to stop chasing every bright light and every tantalizing thing and say, God, I am yours. He has every right to expect that of the one betrothed to him, doesn't he? We were going down the road the other day, and I don't know exactly when kids come to this revelation about age and all that, but my son Clay looked at me and said, Dad, you're just in like the sweet spot in life right now, aren't you? Trying to figure out where he's going. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, because he wants to get a job. He's like, because you're old enough to like have a job and do anything you want or rent a car or all that stuff, but you're still young enough that you got a lot of energy and all that, and you can make money and do things. You're just like in the sweet spot right now, aren't you? It's like, yeah, I kind of guess I am. So I wish you'd hurry up and grow up and get out of here so I can use the ball in my hands. No, I didn't say that. But I was thinking, riding down the road, about the privilege of being able to share God's word and how many years God will let me do that. And the day will come that I'll retire from that, though my wife's convinced that day will never come. Warning. But, people retire and you hold retirement parties and people say nice things. What do they say when they're riding in the car on the way home from the retirement party? That's what some of us kind of wish we could get a video of, but maybe we'd be a little afraid to get a video of. What do they say riding home? I want you to know something. If I should be around this long, if you're riding home from a retirement ceremony for me someday and you look at your wife or your husband and say, you know what, there's better preachers on the planet, I'd be fine with you saying that. If riding home you say, there's smarter guys on the planet than Todd, I'd be fine with you saying that. If riding home you say, you know what, we could find pastors who could build better organizations or do this smarter or do this better or organize this better, I'll be okay with all of that. I'll be fine with any of that. But what I hope you can say riding home, what I long for you to be able to say riding home is, you know what, I've bumped into Pastor Todd on a Tuesday afternoon, and you know, it just feels to me that he really does love God as much in the middle of the week as it looks like he loves God when he's preaching to us. And if that can be said of me, and by the way, I'm not feeding you your line, because I don't want you to have to lie to your husband or wife to say that about me. But if indeed that can be said of me, then someday I can go to my grave content, because it means I've been faithful to the end. And I've used what God has given me. I've lived for him 7 days a week. And I believe then that I can stand before him as a bride dressed in white. This morning, I wonder when we read these kind of passages, if sometimes we don't take a minute and go, you know, if God had come back Wednesday at 3 o'clock this last week, that wouldn't have been a good scene for me. Or if he had come back just at that moment when that fight was going on in our house and I said that thing, that wouldn't have been a good moment for me. Or I'd be nervous about the Lord coming back on Friday nights when I hang with the guys and we do X, Y, Z. And this morning, I'm not the Holy Spirit. I don't need to do his work. He does that. But if he today would let you examine your life and say, do I live like someone who's looking forward to the wedding? And give you an opportunity just to make sure that's right. That's how we ought to close. I want us to bow our heads together this morning.